let's see. Okay, let's move over. Okay, I got a little update on the Kursk situation, because I think last time we talked about it, it was maybe a day or two after it happened. There was kind of a lot of gray area as to what went on and where things stood. But I've actually seen a lot of pretty detailed reporting on the actual operation itself, which is even more interesting than I initially thought it to be. So in the episode where I talked about the Operation Pipeline, as it's being referred to now, I said something like 100 Russian commandos traveled through a pipeline to get behind Ukrainian lines and set up a perimeter and, cause mass confusion and collapse the entire Ukrainian line. I said the northeast portion of the Ukrainian line, but it turns out it was the entire Ukrainian line. Yeah. Turns out it was between 500 and 800. I've seen some sources say 500 soldiers came through the pipeline. Some sources say 800 soldiers came through the pipeline. And if you know anything about the scale of combat in this war, where offensives, like the Ukrainian offensives, have been going on all week long since then, and they involve 200 or 300 troops apiece per offensive, per little micro offensive. But so this is a pretty big incursion, and it took 3 or 4 months to plan, supposedly. But this pipeline that these Russian commandos were traveling in is only 4 feet tall. And they traveled for up to around a mile in this pipeline in order to get to behind Ukrainian lines. And so about 3 weeks before the operation started, engineers were prepping the pipeline, making sure that the air was breathable, putting little way stations so that soldiers can actually get inside and stand up and, relax, eat food. There were latrines, stuff like that, because they knew that soldiers are going to be in there for several days.
Which is wild.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
They had accumulation points stocked with supplies and places for soldiers to sleep and, ammunition and stuff like that. And it was mostly special forces. There were the Ahmad Special Forces and the Veteran Brigade, it's called the Veteran Brigade, and it's a former Wagner PMC company that were all Putin loyalists who didn't take part in the uprising. So there were some other elite troops that went through the line, and I'm not familiar with all of them. Those are just the two that I know. But the Ukrainians saw this buildup happening because it was months in preparation, and they had satellite photography and drone footage and everything else. But they just thought that it was going to be a regular invasion, so they prepped their lines and were ready for the Russians to attack them in using the methods that they've been using throughout this entire Kursk campaign. And they did. They attacked from 3 sides pretty intensively. And while that fighting was going on, they also sent between 500 and 800 troops through the tunnel to pop up behind Ukrainian lines. And a lot of people, basically the cope about this in the Western press has been that the only reason that this operation was successful is because it happened a day or two after the United States stopped sharing intel and sending money and weapons to Ukraine. Which is just so supremely dishonest. I don't think anyone can actually believe that. It's just it really has to be just a propaganda narrative that all these people have decided to adopt. Because what are satellite images going to tell you about a pipeline? The pipeline had been being worked on for 3 weeks anyway. So if there was any way for U.S. intelligence to have figured out what was going on, it could have happened in that 3 weeks. Essentially, the only thing that wasn't viewed by satellites was them popping out of the ground and attacking the Ukrainians from the rear. So it's supremely dishonest. And this operation was massively successful, partially because of the conventional attacks that were going on in the northeast and west. And the sort of pièce de résistance would have been like the commandos popping up behind enemy lines and collapsing the front. But
It's a really genius move.
And the thing is it's the third time they've done something like this.
Yeah, that does not speak very highly of the Ukrainian commanding officers.
No, well, the Ukrainian chief of staff was fired as a result of this. But I mean, honestly, Zelensky should fire himself and Syrskyi, the commander of Ukrainian armed forces. Syrskyi's been presiding over 13 months at this point of straight losses every single day, a little bit of territory lost, and several key points in the Donbass that had been fortified over years and years since like 2014 were lost as well. But like the arguments in the press now are over whether or not there are trapped Ukrainians or not, because apparently Trump, I mentioned this in the last one that we did, Trump begged Putin not to slaughter all of the trapped Ukrainians in the Kursk area. And Zelensky said, there are no trapped Ukrainians. Syrskyi came out and said, there are no trapped Ukrainians. And so the Western press has put up this narrative that there are no trapped Ukrainians. But operationally, there are trapped Ukrainians. They are not physically encircled, but the route out of Kursk is incredibly perilous. I watched a video this morning of Ukrainians traveling at high speed along this road trying to dodge drones. And as they're driving down this road, they're driving past hundreds, no exaggeration, hundreds of burnt, destroyed vehicles in the road, on the sides of the road, that have been hit with artillery fire, drones, and missile strikes as they're trying to make their way in and out of this road.
I kind of think that means basically trapped.
Yeah, and that's, if you talk to people, military analysts, they'll call it fire control over the road, which means that the Russians are able to fire at will with no opposition on anything that moves on that road. They have complete fire control over that road. So what is happening is that Ukrainians that have been fleeing, and if you look at in the Western press, have been ordered to withdraw, which means fleeing, are doing so on foot. And there are several instances where trapped pockets of Ukrainian soldiers, tens, dozens, maybe a few hundred, have been surrounded in tiny little cauldrons and captured or killed. I watched a video this morning that was taken by a Ukrainian body cam or helmet cam, some sort of GoPro attachment, where their position, they ran out of ammunition, their position was surrounded, and they were approached by, Russian soldiers that told them to surrender, and they surrendered. And they were just completely surrounded, dozens of Ukrainian troops. And so you could see it happening in real time, on top of the fact that there was an article in the BBC just recently about interviewing several Ukrainian soldiers about how they were surrounded, had to flee on foot, and that their route in and out of Kursk is completely cut off because the Russians have fire control. And they refer to the road as coming in between Sumy and Suja as the road of death. So, I mean,
they're trapped.
There's not thousands of Ukrainians in a physical encirclement. There are, however, thousands of Ukrainians with one access road that is operationally encircled by the Russians because they have fire control over the only road in and out. And I say only road. There are several lesser roads that are not paved or are not paved as well. And because it's the Rasputitsa, the thawing season, it means that they're a complete morass and they're almost completely impassable.
Almost basically not roads.
Not really, not right now. So anyway, that's what's going on in Kursk. I've seen videos. So the Russians have claimed that there are 1,000 confirmed destroyed military vehicles in the Kursk area. And I don't know if that includes all of the civilian vehicles that the Ukrainians confiscated in order to flee. But that's 1,000 vehicles destroyed. and which
I
indicates
mean, it's just like that's staggering. That's just like so. I think
yeah.
it's just hard to even comprehend the scale of all of this.
And in almost every single one of those vehicles, you're going to have like casualties. Unless the people got, I've seen videos of this happening too, where people will hop out of the vehicles and run away, and then it'll get blown up. But a lot of those are going to be with extreme casualties of everybody in the vehicle dying or being hurt or whatever else. So that's 1,000 claimed by the Russians, and I believe it because I've seen the footage of hundreds on just a little stretch of road. And you can, if you look at the geolocated satellite data as well, you can tell that there are hundreds of hulks of vehicles lining the road. But on top of that, there were warehouses full of vehicles, and I've seen videos of M1 Abrams and Leopards being like carted off by the Russians, like pulled onto the back of trucks and driven away, and warehouses full of Bradley fighting vehicles and infantry personnel, like what the light infantry vehicles, like Hummers and whatever it is that replaced the Hummer. I forget what it's called. JLTV, that's what it is.
Okay, yeah.
They have those too, and it's basically like the thing that replaced the Humvee. So a bunch of those captured on top of just stacks and stacks of NATO weapons like Javelin, Stinger missiles, 50 cal machine guns, just all stacked up. These giant warehouses in Suja, because they fled and they left everything behind because it was a complete rout. And the Western press is trying to play it down, but there's footage. I've seen the footage. I've seen it's all geolocated too. They'll show you on the map where this footage is coming from. And it'll be dated now, and you could tell that it's now because of the uniforms that the Russians are wearing. Because I know sometimes you'll find people posting, like I've seen some posts of like Ukrainians being captured looking like it's the hundreds. They're like, oh, this is from the Kursk region. Look at all these Ukrainians they captured. But it turns out they're wearing old camo that the Ukrainians don't wear anymore, and the Russians are wearing old camo that the Russians don't wear anymore. And it was from Mariupol and not from Kursk. So, like, that kind of stuff does happen. But the people that know these things better than I do have shown that the Kursk region, that there are probably billions of dollars worth of captured equipment.
They can't make anybody in the West happy. They can't make any of the NATO top brass confident about the future.
Right. And of all that footage taken by Ukrainians, taken by Russians, taken by the journalists that are on the ground there, like Russians have tons of journalists there. There's a bunch of independent journalists that have been allowed to go to the front and stuff like that. Still, no evidence of North Korean troops, even though that's part of the Ukrainian narrative is that there were like 10,000 North Korean troops there. Of course, they disappeared for several months, but all of a sudden they all came back just to defeat the Ukrainians at Kursk.
Well, I mean, that's how the North Koreans work.
They disappear?
Very mysterious ways.
Oh, yeah, sneaky.
It's very sneaky, yes.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, so, I mean, that's, of course, that narrative is bullshit also. Still no evidence. In a war where literally everything that happens is accompanied by footage, there's never been any evidence whatsoever of masses of North Korean troops. The closest we've come to any kind of evidence of North Korean troops is those two that were dressed in Russian uniforms, carrying Tuvan passports, and had been beaten into admitting that they were North Koreans.